Hello everybody, look at what I got in front of me today. This is the Razer Wolverine V2 Pro. This guy works on the PlayStation 5 and PC. In the box, you're gonna get the controller. It's super nice looking. I got the black and white version. Initially in the pictures, I didn't think this looked good, but in person it actually looked a lot better than I thought. It's actually growing on me. Pretty high quality plastic and really grippy handles. These are cutouts. They're hard plastics, but the cutouts are really deep, so it kind of feels soft. You get 2 additional thumbstick caps, one short one and it's domed, and then a longer one. Typically on other Pro controllers, you get 4 additional thumbsticks. Here, you only get 2, and I don't know why. And this package does a lot of things that makes no sense, and I'll tell you about them. But what I will say though, what you do get is super high quality. Check this out. This is a wireless dongle. It's got this etching on here, Razer. It's got like a stick cap too. Look at that. Super nice. You also get a wire too. Stick caps on these as well. And this kind of bugs me. This wire is super short. It's only 4.5 feet long. You practically have to be right next to your PS5 to wire this guy up. To start, let's talk about what this guy does not have that other typical Pro controllers have. 1, it does not come with a case. And typically I don't like to mention the price because really I feel like that's a personal choice. If you think something is worth it to you, then you're gonna spend the money. But in this case though, I think it's important because it lacks so many things that you expect from a Pro package for costing $250, and you don't even include a case with this? What the heck? And I think Razer is totally confused when they release this thing. Is this a Pro controller or is it not? And they charge you premium pricing for it, and yet it does not have basic features such as rumble or adaptive triggers. Alright, with that out of the way, let's turn this bad boy on and talk about it, because there is a lot to like about this controller. Alright, let's start with the thumbsticks. In terms of tension, these are pretty light. I'm gonna say they are very similar to the Xbox Series controllers. We don't have any ability to change the tension or anything on here. It is what it is. But what I will say though, this guy has really smooth rotations. Just buttery smooth. So I'm not sure if it's the ring or the stick itself. Maybe it's the combination of both, but it just rotates so smoothly. Wow. And when you combine it with the dome cap, it's magnetic, so you just kind of pop it in. If you are a player who likes to use the thumbsticks, these 2 combinations are great. Super smooth. Or if you're somebody who likes to use the thumbsticks occasionally to do circular motions, this is great for that. The face buttons are very good actually. They're very clicky and tactile. These guys use mice switches. They spring up pretty quickly. And they're close enough where you can press 2 buttons at once. I like these a lot. They work really well. The shoulder buttons are nice and clicky. You can press it on both sides pretty easily. The tension on the triggers are pretty snappy. They're pretty heavy, but they don't have a lot of travel. And I really enjoy the curve here on the trigger. It allows your finger to wrap around it pretty securely. And I can go back and forth between the shoulder button and the trigger very easily. This guy also has the trigger lock option. It's just either lock or unlock. So right now it's unlock. I'm gonna go ahead and lock it. Now it acts like a button. You can really see the difference here versus here. You also get these two additional buttons inside of the triggers. Just by looking at it, you would think that you can't really access it easily, but these are great. It's really easily accessible. So I usually hold my controller like this. I use the upper knuckle part of my fingers to pull the triggers, and then the tip of my finger to access these guys, and the lower part of my knuckle to access the shoulder button. It's very intuitive actually once you get used to it. And these guys feel exactly like clicking on a mouse, just like the face buttons. If you turn the controller around, you're gonna see 4 additional back buttons. And I really am not a fan of this design. This is so awkward. They probably want these buttons to stay out of the way. So when you hold your controller, you got a good grip, right? But if you plan to use it, you gotta reach so far to get to them. Yeah, I don't love this design at all. And the top 2 buttons here require you to press these guys in pretty hard. The bottom 2 buttons are a little easier, but it's still super awkward and out of the way. And I have really long fingers and I have trouble reaching it. So if you have small hands or stubby fingers or short fingers, forget about it. Luckily, we still have these 2 buttons up here. So I recommend using these 2 if you need extra buttons, and only use these for menu navigation. Alright, let's talk about the D-pad. This guy is advertised as an 8-way D-pad, meaning there are 8 switches around here. So the switches are located around the edges of the D-pad. And it feels great. It feels like an arcade stick, but on a D-pad. And just by looking at it, you're thinking this guy's going to be great for 2D games or games with motion input. To a certain extent, that's true. However, because the switches are located around the edges of the D-pad, you're going to have to exaggerate the motion to hit all of these switches. So for example, if I want to do a half circle like this, I'm going to have to go like this and then exaggerate it on the edges so that this bottom switch will get activated. If I just go like this, oftentimes this is going to get missed. Now Street Fighter, as you know, is really forgiving in terms of inputs, so it's a bad example to show. But in games like DOA 6 here, where it's not as forgiving, you're going to run into some problems. So for example, the down input is missing. If you slide your finger like this and then you hit this part and not all the way down, you're gonna miss the down input. You're gonna really have to get all of the edges to make sure that all of the inputs are registered. You gotta really exaggerate your inputs. Well, the good news is this though, is I think you can get used to it. You gotta be extra conscious about hitting the edges and make sure that this pad is slid all the way down, right, and around. Where something like this, where there's 4 buttons and they are on the inner part of the D-pad. This allows your thumb to go from here to here to here really super easily. You can leave the tip of your thumb in the middle and then just kind of roll. With this, you can't really do that. Well, that's fine then. You can get used to rolling your thumbs around the edges when you want to do circular motions, but you're going to run into another problem. You notice that there is this cross imprint on top of this plate. On the inside is pretty low, but it gets raised up pretty high when you get toward the edge. And this part right here is just super sharp. So when you roll your fingers, it's going to get stuck and it's going to tear up your thumb. I kind of wish that they are all even, and then I would only raise it up to here and make it uniform and smooth at the edges here. And I love the idea of an 8-way D-pad like this. I would make this ring smaller. That way I can put the switches closer to the center. And as a result of that, I don't have to exaggerate my motion to hit all of the switches. If the switch is in here, then my thumb don't have to go all the way down here to make sure that the switch is being activated. If you only play Street Fighter with it being really forgiving with motion inputs, you may not realize that this D-pad has that problem. With that being said though, it's not all bad. In fact, there's a lot of good with this D-pad. For one, diagonals are really accurate. Double taps works well. However, I feel that this is kind of slow. And again, it comes down to the switches being too far. So what you gotta do is you gotta make sure this D-pad goes all the way up to activate the switch, and then it comes back pretty far, and then you gotta go back up again to hit the switch. Versus again on this guy, where the button is right underneath, you can just go bam bam and it gets activated right away. And I really believe that having the switches a little closer toward the center will solve a lot of the problem that I'm having with this controller right now. To customize this controller, you're gonna need the app. It's called the Razer controller app. Press these two buttons to put it into pair mode. Alright, on the app, it's got some default profiles. It's got shooter, fighting, sports, and racing. Under profiles, I'm gonna click on fighting, and then you're gonna see this menu right here. Here you can set these extra buttons to whatever button you want. You can only assign one button at a time. Also, you can adjust the sensitivity of the sticks. You can also change the RGB effects. As you can see here, there's not a lot of options. And this is the only way to remap the extra buttons. I'm not sure why Razer does this. This is so confusing. This should be part of the Razer Synapse app. It'll just be a lot easier to adjust this on the PC or have an app on the PlayStation than having to pair this guy to your phone every single time you need to make an adjustment. It's just weird. It's that time for a quick input lag test on this controller. On wired, the minimum input delay is 0.86, so that's really quick. Maximum 2.94, average input delay 1.92. This is amazing, and that's because the polling rate is super high at 520 Hz. On wireless, I get 1.63, so a little bit slower. Maximum input delay 9.83 seconds. Again, with wireless, you're gonna have to deal with interference and inconsistency, so the range here is gonna be a lot bigger. But on average though, it still get great input delay, super fast at 3.86 milliseconds. Polling rate is about half of the wired, 258. And these are great numbers. This is super fast. This is only second to the DualSense Edge. If you haven't seen my review for that one, go ahead and check it out. When compared to the Chroma, and the Chroma is only wired. The wired numbers is a lot faster. We went from 3.5 to less than 1 millisecond at fastest, and in about 8 milliseconds down to about 3. Average 3.87 to 1.92, and that's because the polling rate is twice as frequent as on the Chroma. Alrighty, final thoughts. The controller in itself is a good controller. I really love the extra shoulder buttons up here. Don't really care for these too much. The face buttons are awesome. The thumbsticks are very good and smooth. Unfortunately, the D-pad is only good for certain games, but it can be great if you can get used to it and put the time in it. But as the total package, I feel like they kind of missed the mark. First of all, at $250, this thing should have everything in it. This is probably one of the most expensive controllers on the market, if not the most. And it's got a lot of things missing from it that really does not justify the price. For example, no rumble, no adapter triggers, only 2 stick caps, and the wire is hella short. When you compare this guy, the V2 Pro, versus the V2 Chroma, this thing is $100 cheaper and essentially is the same controller minus the wireless functionality. So you tell me, is the wireless functionality worth an extra $100? If you're gaming on PC, I would just get this one. And if you're wondering, the D-pad on this guy and this guy, they're exactly the same. The only reason that I can think of why you should get this controller is if you only game on the PS5 and you have to have an 8-way D-pad, and this 8-way D-pad, as discussed, is not perfect. But with that being said though, if this guy is the same price, as this guy, I would totally recommend it. At 150 bucks, it's worth it. 250 just for the ability to play wirelessly, not worth it. Alrighty, hopefully you found that to be helpful. If you did, give the video a thumbs up, subscribe for more, and take care now.